Now, the green glass building to our right here, this was built in 1987 as the headquarters of Quaker Oats. At one time, they had the world's largest box of Quaker Oats that you could see in that lobby on the lower floors. It's all glass, but they moved out a while ago, and now this is the American Bar Association tower. So if you need a lawyer, they could definitely help you out in there. Now this restaurant here, this is very popular. This is the Bridge House Tavern. This is the only restaurant along the river where you can dock your boat up, jump out and grab a beer. Only private restaurant. So, you think there'd be more of them, but that is the only private restaurant there. Now this building on the right, more restaurants here. Water taxi stop. This is known as the Reed Murdoch Center, built in 1914. So this was a warehouse when it was first built. And it's a very good looking building for being a warehouse. George Nimmons was the architect here. This at one time was the central office building for the city of Chicago. So that's where you had to go to pay your parking ticket or to get the boot off your car. So not everybody has a great memory of going in that building. Now the next building coming up on the right has a very famous steakhouse here called Chicago Cut. The rest of the building, it's known as 300 North LaSalle by Picard Chilton. It's a stainless steel and glass building. You don't see stainless steel used very often because it's quite expensive. The building has lots of sustainable or green architecture features in it, including two vegetated roofs. It uses water that comes from the river to cool the air conditioning system instead of a cooling tower, and use lots of materials that were sourced from the local area that combines to give that building a LEED rating of gold. Now LEED, L-E-E-D, stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. It's a point system that architects use to certify that they're following best practices in sustainability. Now here on the right we have an enormous building. This building, when it was completed in 1930, was the biggest building in the world as far as space inside. This was a former warehouse for Marshall Field's department store, the Merchandise Mart. Today's mostly offices. So the building was built, biggest building in the world, but then the Pentagon was built a few years later. The building is so large that it had its own zip code just for the building for many years. Now, you see these sculptures of these men's heads of copper on these big posts right along the river. That's a Merchandisers Hall of Fame. So you have Julius Rosenwald, who was the head of Sears, Aaron Montgomery Ward from Ward's, Marshall Field. David Letterman was in town once. He saw those big heads perched atop those posts. He thought they looked like the world's largest Pez dispensers. This is Wolf Point here. They just started this construction 2 days ago. But in 3 years, this will be a 40-story condominium tower here. So they're just getting started on it here, excavating the topsoil there. So this is called Wolf Point. This is the original settlement area for Chicago after DeSable left. And this is where they decided to call this place Chicago when people were first settling here. Now they probably didn't know what that word meant, because that word comes from a Native American word that was pronounced something like Chickaqua, and it meant stinky onion. When the Native Americans first arrived here, they found this smelly plant that was growing along the river, and so that's where our city's name comes from. Now we've been on the main branch of the Chicago River. To the right of us where that tour boat is going, that is known as the North Branch. And we're going to head a little bit down the South Branch here. To your right, we see a glass office building with that kind of parabolic arch. That's a brand new office building that opened just about a month and a half ago called River Point by Picard Chilton. There's another office tower over here, opened just recently as well. This one is called 150 North Riverside. Notice how narrow it is at the bottom. It almost looks top-heavy. That's because this building sits where there's a lot of railroad tracks behind it. The architects had a limited area for the building to connect to the ground. So the middle of the building behind the gray is a concrete core that goes all the way up the building. It goes down 10 stories into the ground, and it works kind of like a tree branching out as it goes up. So the train tracks that go behind that building go underneath all these buildings for the next several blocks. Now here we have coming up next the home of the Boeing Company. So you'll see the Boeing sign here. It's just up to the right here above the front door. This is 100 North Riverside. This is from a Perkins and Will Architects. It was built in 1990. So the train tracks go under the building.